My name is Damon Gameau, and I have the great honour of hosting today and introducing you to some really fantastic speakers. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this turns into in the years ahead, because it speaks to how passionate people are about this topic right now. So what I'm going to do quickly is just give an overview of, I think, why we're all here today, and just to set up some context for the different speakers you're going to hear. So I just want to show you a graphic very quickly of where Australia's at right now ecologically and why we need to regenerate. So this circle here, if those of you can't read it, says the safe and sustainable zone. So that's kind of, if Australia was living sustainably, we'd be operating within that green boundary there. But you can see these orange and flame boundaries are where we've crossed. And so many of these boundaries are what our survival now depends on. And there's a lot here I've put. There's plastics, there's our material footprint, which is really important. But I really want to focus on some of these key areas that are relative for our discussion today. Climate change, the species loss, land changes, and then the industrial agriculture chemical use, because I think all of those are deeply interconnected. And what you're going to hear about today is how we can get into this sustainable zone. So sustainability is a great goal. We had a chance of living sustainably in the 80s or early 90s, but we blew through that. We now actually have to regenerate to get to sustainability. That's our target. But regeneration is going to get us there because we've got to repair and restore the damage that we've done to our beautiful ecosystems. So number one up the top here is climate change. I won't go into that too much because I think we've heard the most about that one. We know the impact that in this country in particular, we're vulnerable. We've warmed about 1.4 degrees compared to the rest of the world, which is about 1.2 degrees. So that's why we're seeing the extremes we see in Australia. Most of the meteorologists are saying we're on track for another El Nino this year. There's probably about a 60% chance. We've seen the ocean starting to warm up. So we might go through a pretty intense dry spell in the next few years. And as we know, there's a lot of growth around because of the rains we've had. But I really want to focus on here, the species loss. So this one is, we should all be ashamed of. Australia is now a global leader in wildlife extinctions. And every year we now lose 50 million mammals. So 50 million mammals are beautiful, unique animals, largely because of this next one, which is the land changes. So again now, out of all the OECD countries, Australia's ranked number one for deforestation and land clearing. We remove a patch of forest or bushland the size of the MCG every 86 seconds in this country. So even though Victoria has taken some good steps around native logging, New South Wales and Queensland are still appalling in terms of our deforestation rates. And obviously that is sending carbon into the atmosphere, that is destroying the habitat for so much of these animals. But as we'll learn today, it's also where the pollinators live in these habitats. And we need our pollinators for half of the fresh produce we get at the supermarkets. All the best bits, the almonds and the pears and the avocados, all the things we love to eat, we don't get unless we have pollinators. And we're destroying the habitats for those pollinators. And also what we'll learn today is that land cover, the vegetation, the forest, that's keeping moisture in the landscape. It's cooling our planet. We hear so much about greenhouse gases trapping heat in the system, but what if we could control the heat that's getting trapped in the system? So if we cool our landscapes, stop clearing them, look after our soils, we lower the temperature that's re-radiating off that landscape to be trapped in the atmosphere. That stuff doesn't get talked about, which we should be talking about a lot more. And then obviously industrial agriculture chemical use over here, the nitrogen and the phosphorus, we've blown through that boundary, as most of you will be aware. It's affecting our waterways, it's affecting the reef, all that runoff. And if you look at some of the early explorers like Strzelecki, who looked at some of the organic matter in our soils back in 1840, actually took 5 or 6 samples in different parts of the country. He found it was somewhere between 5 and 10% of organic matter. We're down now to somewhere around 0.3%. So much of our beautiful, rich soils that did exist, he described trying to get his cart through the Liverpool plains. It was so spongy, he couldn't get his horse there. We've just blown all that. As Charles Massey says, we've exported that to New Zealand. You can now find it in the Alps in New Zealand. So what you're going to learn, I think, today is that even though we've blown through these boundaries and we need to regenerate, the good news is that all of these are deeply interconnected. So when we start to heal and repair one of these boundaries, it has a cascading benefit for a different boundary. So the land changes. If we start protecting our forests, replanting vegetation, obviously this boundary comes in, but also it's creating more habitat for the species. So that boundary starts to come in. We're sequestering more carbon. We're lowering the surface temperature, which brings the climate change boundary in. And of course, this is going to start coming in as we use less chemicals, use more regenerative practices that you're going to hear about today. So that's why you're all here. It's probably why you're here. Out of all of this is one of the most, if not the most important ways that we can change our ecological practices, heal our future for all living things, is by improving our landscapes. They play such a big role. Unfortunately, we only hear about the renewables and the EVs, but this is far more important and has far more cascading benefits.